She promised we'd be alone, but her alien species knows nothing of privacy. The human had never trusted easily, not after the war, not after the long years of betrayal. Yet when she leaned closer, her voice almost trembling as she spoke, he felt something inside him break in silence. She promised that they would be alone. Her alien words carried the same weight as an oath. Her strange glowing eyes looked into his, full of certainty, full of something he wanted to believe. For a brief moment he allowed himself to breathe in that comfort. He followed her through the narrow passages of her settlement. The walls were not made of stone or steel, but of living roots that twisted like frozen rivers. They pulsed faintly as though the entire village was alive, breathing, listening. He tried not to look at the shapes moving in the walls, shapes that resembled faces, eyes and mouths that closed when he turned too quickly. She guided him with grace, her silver skin reflecting the pale light from the glowing moss above. She promised again in a softer voice that here they would be free from the gaze of others. He clung to those words like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Privacy was all he wanted. He was human, and humans were built on the fragile comfort of walls, of closed doors, of quiet moments where no one was watching. He told himself she understood this, that her promise meant the same to her as it did to him. But each time she smiled, he felt a shadow behind it, a slight confusion in her expression, as though she did not fully grasp the weight of what she had offered. They entered a chamber that stretched wide, the ceiling high enough to vanish into the dim glow. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and flowers he could not name. She gestured for him to sit on the woven mat of roots, and he obeyed. For a while it seemed perfect. Just her and him, no sound beyond their breathing, no movement beyond her gentle hands brushing against his. His chest eased. His mind softened. Perhaps for the first time since he had been stranded among her people, he felt safe. But then it began. At first, it was nothing more than a soft vibration in the floor. A pulse that did not match his own heartbeat. He pressed his hand against the ground and realized the roots beneath him were trembling, alive, whispering. He froze. She noticed his unease and touched his arm, assuring him once more that they were alone. Her words were steady, calm, but his human mind refused to believe them when he heard faint laughter in the walls. He rose to his feet, scanning the chamber. The sound grew louder, no longer laughter but the hushed murmur of voices. He caught glimpses, faint flickers in the edges of his vision, figures that dissolved whenever he turned to face them. The promise of privacy collapsed with every second. The human clenched his fists, forcing down the panic that rose inside. She seemed unbothered, almost confused by his reaction. "Do you not feel them?" he asked, his voice sharp. "The eyes, the voices?" Her gaze softened and she tilted her head as if trying to understand. To her there was nothing unusual in the whispers, nothing unnatural in the presence that pressed against the air. She placed her hand against his chest, steadying him. "We are alone," she repeated firmly. The human felt the cold weight of those words settle in his stomach. He realized then that she was not lying. She believed it with all her heart. She truly thought they were alone, even as unseen eyes traced his every move. What she promised was not deception. It was a difference in meaning. Her people did not understand privacy. To them there was no alone. The whispers in the walls, the watchers in the shadows, they were part of life itself. He tried to calm himself, to accept that maybe he was imagining things, that maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on his senses. But the feeling would not fade. The eyes lingered, pressing into his back. The voices swirled, rising and falling like a tide of unseen souls. He turned back to her, desperate. "When humans say alone, it means no one else. No watchers, no voices. Just you and me." Her face showed a flicker of sorrow as though she had failed him somehow. "This is alone," she whispered, her tone sincere. "No one will disturb us." He shuddered, realizing the impossible gulf between them. To her, alone meant without interruption. To him it meant absence. And in this alien world, absence did not exist. Still, he stayed. Part of him wanted to believe, even against the evidence of his senses. He sat again, forcing himself into stillness. She smiled and leaned closer, her touch warm against his skin. The voices faded for a moment and the eyes retreated into the dark. For a heartbeat, he let himself fall into the fragile illusion of solitude. But deep within, he knew the truth. He was not alone. He would never be alone again. Not in this place, not with her people. The promise had been made, and she had kept it in her way. Yet for him it was already broken. The roots pulsed beneath them, alive with whispers. The walls breathed. And though she held his hand, though her words were full of sincerity, the human understood the terrible reality. The alien woman had given him her promise, but her promise belonged to a world that knew nothing of privacy. The human tried to rest, but his body refused to let go of the tension. He lay on the mat, his eyes half closed, pretending to sleep while his ears strained against the silence. It was never truly silent here. The chamber had a life of its own. The walls pulsed softly, the ground vibrated with faint movement, and behind it all lingered the quiet sense of being watched. When he opened his eyes again, the alien woman was still beside him. Her face was calm, her breathing steady. Her gaze fixed on him with quiet devotion. For a moment her presence soothed him. Yet even as she held his hand, he felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing in from every angle. He sat up suddenly, his breath sharp, and the shadows seemed to retreat at once as though they had been caught. She frowned, tilting her head, puzzled by his sudden alarm. "Why are you afraid?" she asked gently. He wanted to shout, to tell her that every corner of this place was filled with hidden watchers, but the words froze in his throat. He realized with a deep chill that she did not even sense them. To her this was natural. To her the eyes were not intruders, but part of her world. His voice finally broke through the silence. "Because we are not alone." "You promised. You said, we are alone," she interrupted softly with a tone that carried no doubt. She did not lie. She truly believed it. But her words only made the fear inside him grow stronger. That night the whispers became clearer. They no longer sounded like echoes in the walls. They became voices, hushed yet full of intent. He could not understand the words, but the rhythm felt wrong, almost mocking. When he turned toward the sound, he caught glimpses of movement. Tiny silhouettes darting away, long limbs bending unnaturally as they melted back into the living roots of the walls. He blinked hard, thinking it was his imagination, but the sound of footsteps remained. The alien woman brushed his shoulder and urged him to lie down again. "They will not disturb us," she whispered. Her certainty was unshakable, but her words only confirmed the human's dread. They. She spoke of them as though they were always here, always present, never absent. He lay back down, but kept his eyes open. Minutes turned into hours, each second a fresh assault of unseen movements. He watched the shadows crawl across the walls, stretching in ways that light should never allow. He saw reflections of glowing eyes in the slick roots above him, blinking once before fading away. His pulse raced and sweat gathered on his skin, though the air was cool. When dawn came, or what passed for dawn in this place of eternal glow, he tried to step outside. But the village was no safer. Everywhere he walked, alien children giggled from hidden corners. Elders watched him from the edges of pathways, their eyes unblinking, their faces expressionless. No matter how far he went, he felt the same pressure, always being observed, always being measured. He spun around once, catching a child staring openly from the curve of a root wall. The child did not look away, did not hide. Instead, it laughed softly as if his discomfort was amusing. When he looked back at the woman, she smiled, unbothered. "They care for you," she said. He wanted to scream. Care was not what he felt. He felt hunted. By the third night, exhaustion gnawed at him. Sleep came only in fragments, broken by sudden jolts of fear when he sensed movement nearby. He once woke to find a figure crouched in the corner of the chamber, a shape that vanished when he blinked. He asked her if she had seen it, but she only shook her head. "There is no one here," she told him, her tone tender, almost pitying. That word again, alone. It burned in his mind like a curse. To her it meant safe from harm. To him it meant no one else. And he realized now that this difference was not something he could teach, not something she could learn. It was a truth buried deep within her people, an instinct older than her language. He tried to explain. He told her humans needed walls, doors, silence, empty space. He told her that solitude was as vital as breath. She listened quietly, but her expression never changed. Finally, she touched his cheek and whispered, "We share everything, even silence." Her words filled him with dread. If they shared silence, then silence was never his. If they shared everything, then nothing was private. Not his thoughts, not his fears, not his soul. The following day he wandered alone, or what passed for alone here. The villagers' eyes followed him, silent but sharp. Every step he took echoed with the sense of a shadow just behind him. He paused once, certain someone was breathing down his neck, but when he spun around, the pathway was empty. Still, the feeling remained. As the night returned, the alien woman rested her head on his shoulder, speaking softly of trust, of safety, of unity. Her words were sweet, her touch warm, yet his body trembled with unease. He stared into the dim chamber, the whispers curling like smoke through the air, the shadows shifting with hidden life. The human understood the terrible truth now. It was not that she had broken her promise. It was that she had kept it. She had given him what her people considered solitude, and it was suffocating. Privacy did not exist here. In their world, eyes in the shadows were as natural as air, and he was the stranger who could not breathe it. And though he longed to close his eyes, he knew he could not. For in this place, even in the deepest darkness, he would never be unseen. The human had begun to count the hours by the rhythm of his fear. Each day bled into the next, and each night returned with whispers too soft to understand but too sharp to ignore. He had grown tired, his body dragging itself through motions that felt mechanical. The alien woman stayed close, her smile tender, her words patient, but her certainty only deepened his confusion. Every time she swore they were alone, he felt the opposite. Every time she promised safety, he sensed danger pressing in from unseen corners. On the fifth night, he woke suddenly. At first he thought it was the usual unease, the constant feeling of eyes in the shadows. But then he realized the silence was different. It was heavier, thicker, pressing against his ears until he almost felt suffocated. Slowly he opened his eyes, and what he saw stole the breath from his lungs. She was no longer lying beside him. Instead, she was seated upright, her posture calm, her silver skin reflecting the faint glow of the walls. Around her, in a wide circle, stood her people, dozens of them, their faces pale and still, their glowing eyes fixed directly on him. They did not speak. They did not move. They simply stared. He sat up quickly, his chest tightening as he tried to steady his breathing. The woman turned to him, her expression soft, almost apologetic. "Do not be afraid," she whispered. "We are alone. Alone." The word echoed like a cruel joke in his mind. There were at least 30 figures surrounding him, silent as stone. Yet to her this was solitude. They were present, but to her they did not count as intrusions. Their gaze was not a violation, it was companionship. He rose to his feet, his voice shaking. "This is not alone. Do you understand me? This is not what I asked for." The aliens tilted their heads in unison, a strange movement that sent a chill crawling across his skin. They did not break their stare. Their glowing eyes reflected a depth he could not decipher, as if they looked not at him but into him. He felt stripped bare, every thought, every secret peeled away under the weight of their collective gaze. He stumbled back, pressing against the root wall. "Why are they here?" he demanded. "Why do they watch me?" The woman stood gracefully, stepping closer. She reached for his hand, her touch gentle. "Because they wish to share your silence," she said softly. "Because you are important." Her words did not calm him. They filled him with dread. To share his silence meant there would never be silence. To share his solitude meant he would never be free. He tried to pull away from her, but her grip held him firm, not forceful but unyielding. The circle of aliens closed in slowly, not with steps, but with the quiet certainty of presence. Their breathing was faint, almost inaudible, yet the air seemed thicker with each passing second. The human felt his heart pound against his ribs, his skin damp with cold sweat. He wanted to scream at them to leave, to vanish, to give him the privacy he needed like air, but he already knew they would not understand. To them, his demand would sound like madness. One of the elders stepped forward, his face carved with lines that glowed faintly in the dim light. He raised a hand, not in threat but in blessing. The gesture was slow, deliberate, as though acknowledging the human in some sacred ritual. The whispers returned, soft but now layered with meaning, words he almost recognized but could not fully grasp. The sound filled the chamber, echoing without echo until it seemed to come from within his own skull. He clutched his head, trying to block it out. The voices grew louder, not in volume but in presence. They filled every corner of his mind, brushing against his memories, probing his fears. He felt exposed in a way deeper than nakedness. They were inside him. They were reading him. The woman touched his shoulder, her eyes pleading. "Do not fight it," she said. "They only wish to know you. To know you is to love you." Her words cut into him like knives. To know him? They already knew too much. He had not offered his secrets, yet they had taken them. He thought of the war, the screams, the blood on his hands. He thought of the times he had begged for forgiveness in the dark, when no one had been there to hear him. And now they knew. All of them knew. He staggered back, shaking his head. "This is wrong," he gasped. "This is not love. This is a prison." But his words meant nothing to them. The aliens stood unmoving, their eyes glowing with a light that pierced deeper than any weapon. They did not understand his anger. They did not even recognize it as anger. To them, he was not a man cornered by a silent crowd. He was a man being embraced by a community that did not believe in walls. The gathering lasted until his body trembled with exhaustion. Finally, the aliens retreated, dissolving back into the walls and shadows, leaving only the woman by his side. She smiled softly and whispered again, "We are alone." He fell to his knees, his mind unraveling. He understood now with cruel clarity. They would never leave him. Solitude was a myth here, privacy an impossible dream. The woman had kept her promise, but the promise itself was a lie, not by intention but by nature. And as he sat trembling in the silent chamber, he realized the truth that hollowed his soul. He would never be unseen again. The human could not escape the memory of that silent circle. Even when the chamber was empty, he still felt their eyes upon him. He walked through the village in daylight, but every pathway seemed to echo with invisible footsteps. The alien woman stayed close, her presence steady and calm, but it no longer soothed him. Her smile, once a comfort, now felt like a mask hiding something deeper, something she herself did not even question. One morning, he tried to test the truth. He sat alone beside a stream of glowing water that cut through the village. He thought of nothing but silence, staring at the faint ripples until his breath slowed. For a brief moment, it felt private. But then he heard a child's voice behind him, speaking words in the alien tongue. He turned, and the child's face lit up with laughter. The boy had repeated the thought that had just passed through the human's mind. Not the words he had spoken aloud, he had spoken none, but the thought itself. His blood ran cold. He rose quickly, demanding an explanation. The child only laughed again, repeating another fragment of his inner voice. He backed away, his heart hammering. Privacy was gone, not just in body but in mind. He stormed back to the chamber where the alien woman waited. She tilted her head, confused by his trembling hands, his frantic eyes. He told her what had happened, his voice sharp and broken. "They can hear me," he gasped. "They can hear my thoughts, even the things I never say. How?" She touched his face, her expression gentle but without fear. "We do not hear," she explained softly. "We share. It is natural. You are among us now. You cannot hide, and you should not want to." Her words chilled him more than the whispers ever had. To her, this was not violation, but intimacy. She believed the sharing of thoughts was love, was trust, was unity. But to him, it was unbearable. He pushed her hand away and stepped back, his eyes burning with anger. "You promised me privacy. You promised me space. And now even my mind is not mine." She lowered her gaze, not out of guilt, but sorrow. "Your mind was never yours alone," she whispered. "Even when you thought it was. You carried your pain, your memories, your fears. We see them because you should not carry them in silence. They belong to all of us," her words carved into him like blades. He thought of the war again, of the faces he had tried to forget. He thought of the screams he had buried deep in his chest, screams no one had ever heard. Now those screams were no longer hidden. The aliens knew them. They had seen his past as clearly as if they had lived it themselves. That night he woke to find her sitting across from him, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She spoke in a low voice, repeating fragments of his dreams. His childhood, his mother's voice, the first time he had killed, the regrets he had tried to bury. She whispered them with tenderness as though they were hers too. He shook, horror and rage boiling inside him. "Stop," he begged. "Those are mine. They are mine alone." But she only smiled sadly. "Nothing is alone," she said. "Not here. Not ever." The walls seemed to breathe louder with her words. The roots pulsed with faint light, and he swore he felt the touch of unseen fingers brushing across his mind. Images not his own flickered within him, memories of places he had never been, lives he had never lived. The thoughts of her people flowed into him like a tide. He fought against it, clutching his head, but it was endless. Their unity was not a choice. It was existence. He stumbled outside into the cold glow of the village. Figures stood silently in the pathways, their eyes following him. He felt their thoughts pressing into his, whispers that were not his own. He heard their curiosity, their pity, even their fascination. They knew him now, every shadow of him, and he in turn felt fragments of them. Their joys, their griefs, their endless unity. It suffocated him. He ran, but no matter how far he went, the voices followed. He hid in the hollow of a root, but their eyes found him even there. He tried to clear his mind, but even his silence echoed back to them. When he returned to her, his voice was broken, almost a whisper. "You have taken everything from me. My body, my thoughts, my past. What is left?" She reached for him again, her touch full of longing. "Everything is left," she said softly, "because nothing is lost when it is shared." Her certainty crushed him. He realized now that escape was impossible. It was not chains that bound him, but eyes, voices, memories that were no longer his. His humanity, built on walls and solitude, was being stripped away piece by piece. They had not lied to him. They had kept their promise. But the meaning of that promise was foreign, alien, terrifying. The whispers in his mind grew louder, merging with his own thoughts until he could no longer tell where he ended and they began. He pressed his hands against his ears, but it made no difference. Privacy was gone. Secrets were gone. And the man who had once lived inside his own silence was being drowned in the endless tide of a people who had never known what it meant to be alone. The human stood at the edge of the village, his chest rising and falling with unsteady breaths. Around him, the air glowed faintly with the pulse of the living roots. Their whispers swirled in his head, never leaving, never giving him a moment of silence. He pressed his palms against his temples, but the voices bled through. They were inside him now, part of him. The alien woman appeared at his side, silent as the shadows. She touched his arm with care, her silver skin cool against his heat. Her eyes glowed softly, full of tenderness, full of the same sincerity she had carried from the beginning. "You are not alone," she whispered again. "You will never be alone." Her words sent a shiver through him. Once he might have wanted that. Once he might have believed those words were comfort. But now they were chains. He looked at her, his throat tight with desperation. "I do not want them in my head. I do not want their eyes on me. I only want one thing, silence. Real silence." Her face softened with sorrow. "There is no silence. Not here, not in this life. Our people have never known such emptiness. To us, silence is death. We live because we are many. We breathe because we share." He stepped back, shaking his head. "But I am human. I cannot live like this. Privacy is what keeps me whole. If I lose that, I lose myself." She did not follow. She stood still, her gaze fixed on him with quiet patience. The roots around them glowed brighter, and he felt the pressure of the entire village's attention. Though he could not see them, he knew they were watching, listening, waiting. He had no secrets left from them. His fears, his memories, his shame, all of it was already exposed. He was naked in a way no human could endure. And yet, as the whispers pressed against his mind, he felt something unexpected. Along with his fears came their comfort. Along with his shame came their forgiveness. They did not mock his weakness nor despise his sins. They carried them as if his burdens were theirs as well. For every shadow he revealed, they offered a light. For every wound, they offered healing. He hated it, but he also felt its power. The human sank to his knees, his heart heavy. He faced a choice that no one else could make for him. If he stayed, he would surrender his humanity. He would let go of the silence, the privacy, the walls that defined him. He would become one of them, a fragment in their endless unity. If he left, he would lose her, the only one who had promised him comfort, even if her promise had been twisted by her people's nature. He looked at her again, her glowing eyes searching his. She did not beg him to stay, nor did she try to hold him. She only whispered, "To be known is to be free." The words tore him apart inside. To her, freedom was unity. To him, freedom was solitude. They were two truths that could never meet. He pressed his hands against the soil, feeling the living pulse beneath it. The roots hummed with voices waiting for his choice. His mind drifted to the war again, to the endless nights of terror when he had begged for silence and found none. Even among humans, he had never truly been free of the memories that haunted him. Here they had stripped those memories bare, but they had also carried them with him. For the first time, he was not alone in his suffering. And that terrified him more than anything. Slowly, he rose to his feet. His voice trembled when he spoke. "If I stay, I will not be me anymore. The woman stepped closer, her hand brushing his cheek. "If you stay, you will never be broken again." The word struck him with cruel tenderness. He closed his eyes, his body trembling. Around him the whispers swelled, wrapping around his thoughts, pulling him into their tide. He felt their lives bleeding into his own. Laughter, sorrow, love, pain. It was overwhelming, drowning, but it was also warmth he had never known. He opened his eyes and looked into hers. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a voice that broke under the weight of his choice, he whispered, "I cannot escape, can I?" She shook her head gently. "There is nothing to escape, only to accept." The human's heart pounded as he stood in the glow of her people. He realized now that privacy was gone forever. His secrets were no longer his. His silence was no longer his. He had entered a world where every wall had eyes, every shadow had voices, and every thought was shared. He could walk away, but the voices would follow. He could fight, but they would never leave. The promise she had given him was not broken. It was fulfilled in the only way her people could understand. The human closed his eyes and let out a long, trembling breath. For the first time, he did not resist. The voices surged within him, no longer whispers but a flood. They knew him. They accepted him. And he was no longer alone. But as he surrendered, a tear slipped down his cheek. He had made his choice. He would stay. But the man who once lived inside his silence was gone. And in that endless unity, where nothing was private and nothing was hidden, a part of him died quietly, unseen even as the rest of him was embraced forever.